Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. And today I'm looking at Ironwood, and disclaimer, I got a review copy for this one. Ironwood is a 1v1 asymmetric combat skirmish game where the Ironclad are going against the Woodwalkers, each trying to fight over territory on this tight map while trying to pursue their objectives. And the game does have a bot for each faction, so you can play solo on either side. I'll talk about that soon. And the factions are drastically different in each of the things they do and how they play, but we'll get into all that in the review, so let's discuss 5 things about Ironwood. So first, for my number 5 point, I want to focus specifically on the solo bot. I'll be mentioning them throughout the rest of the review, but this is like just about them. And there's just a lot. So you have this guy, there's all these different icons, there's all these different rules. And then they have multiple types of movement and just tons of like endless priorities and things for their actions. And you got it for different sections for different types of bots. And the game is desperately in need of more player aids to summarize the stuff, because right now you just have to keep on flipping for the different types of movements and different priorities to the rulebook back and forth. This doesn't have any of that stuff. I'm sure this will be better once people get into it on BGG and create some player aids and stuff, but really the company should have done it in the first place. There's way too much you have to reference in the book for the bots. But on the positive side, something I appreciate is they have a ton of options to increase the difficulty and make the bot tougher. So this is appreciated because you can kind of ramp up the difficulty to ridiculous extents until you are finding the game as challenging as you need it to be. My number 4 point is generally a pro, and that's the diverse victory conditions for the factions. So the Ironclad, the metal faction, they want to get to these outer mountains, put down these foundations, and then spend a ton of crystals to turn them into forges. Whereas the Woodwalkers are trying to draw these discovery cards and play them to put totems down next to the mountains of the Ironclad. And these victory conditions give the factions a lot of their diversity. They have multiple steps, multiple stages through which the other player can try to mess them up and kind of slow them down. And while the solo bot is not perfect, they do tend to pursue their goals pretty well, and they somewhat intelligently react to what you're doing and kind of change their focus based on whether you're about to score or not. My number 3 point is the battles in the game for control of areas, and this is generally a full pro as well. When forces battle, they each have the option to play a card from their hand, and they're going to potentially do damage to each other. And it's a nice quick system. Trying to guess what your opponent might play is very tense. And the choice of whether to play a starting card and thus not get rid of the cool bonus action cards from your hand, or a special card that has way better stats, is a really tough resource choice consistently. And this also works great for the bot because they're just randomly playing cards, but first of all, they get bonuses automatically, so they still tend to be a challenge for you. And then second of all, every time you breathe a sigh of relief because they used a basic card to do the attack, you know that they're going to have a better card coming later for actions or future battles, so the randomness actually self-balances and works really well. My number 2 point is the movement in the game, the tactical movement. And this one is a full pro, I think, for competitive, but a mix for solo. On the positive side, this is a very cool way of doing movement. The Woodwalkers only move through forests. The Ironborn only move through mountains. So it's sort of like area control without ever actually blocking each other. You all have full mobility at all times. It's more like where your troops are and where you're exerting influence. And another fun asymmetric difference is that the Woodwalkers can generally freely move lots of troops from different places, whereas the Ironborn, for each troop affected, will only be from one place to another, so they feel more regimented and limited, which I like. But the negative side of this is something I already mentioned. There are multiple different types of movements with multiple different preferences for each of the factions when you're trying to do the solo movement. And that would be fine on its own for it to be complex, because this is a complex game and movement's going to be the worst part. But on top of them being complex, they're also stupid with it. Like in my Ironbot games, I've gotten them on one side of the board and been able to kind of like run roughshod for the other side. The wooden bot will just not move to actually defend things or attack things intelligently sometimes. So I don't know, it doesn't work out as well as I would hope. My final point is also kind of a mix or maybe a pro for competitive. I do like this game a ton for 1v1 play, and that's the core action system. So you'll have these action cards, and the factions will alternate playing one card at a time. The effects are hugely diverse, not just in one faction's deck, but between the factions. Games feel very different because you're not going to see all your cards generally, and very different options will present themselves to you. You can even have cool ongoing effects that'll give you extra powers for multiple turns. So yeah, I just love this system. It keeps turns pretty snappy, has very tough choices and very diverse play. Like, yes, I know some people might look at this game and be like, oh, there's only 2 factions, but it plays out differently each game because of these action cards. The solo bot works pretty well. I do love how different the actions can be because they do have these different icons they resolve for each card, but you're checking the icons, you're checking them against these things, Often they're going to tell you to move and stuff, which means you have to go and check the rule book and all the priorities in there. Again, player aids are going to help with this if somebody makes some. But I do have to give credit. They do have diversity in how they act. It's not going to play the exact same every game, and they do somewhat intelligently respond to your choices. So overall, Ironwood is an interesting one. For 1v1 play, I think it is great. For a reasonable price, if you like asymmetric factions in games, if you like area control and skirmish and that kind of play, you're going to have a blast with this one. But on the other hand, for a solo-only recommendation, I'm not too sure. I would wait to see if good player aids come out on BGG, so I would advise maybe a bit of caution, a wait-and-see attitude on the solo until we see how things pan out. And if you want to see what I mean and check out the game in action, I had a solo playthrough on the channel recently. Good gaming, everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.